I don't know, who wants to tell us about their local from the pantry, freezer, root cellar meal? Don't be shy. Well, now you're all being shy. Up,
I got something.
Okay, I'll be brave. So we, from the freezer, took some pork that's locally raised in Windsor by my cousin and green beans that we put up from our garden. From the pantry, we took garlic that we grew and parsnips and potatoes that I bought locally at Sheepscot General that they grew. And I made a dessert sweetened with honey. It's a carrot cake, and the honey is local honey from Jefferson. The carrots are from our garden, and the cream cheese and the cream cheese frosting is Maine cream cheese. I didn't make it. It's from Casco Bay, but it's Maine. I made sure it was from Maine. And the eggs are local eggs. So those are all the local things we used. And we made with all of that, we made herb encrusted pork over parsnip puree with roasted potatoes and sauteed green beans and carrot cake for dessert.
Sorry, I made myself bravo. Good job, you guys. Who else wants to tell us? Oh, Tom.
Yes. Thing I really like, I'm most proud of is the spinach that came out of our greenhouse today. Fresh spinach, not quite all winter long.
Congratulations.
Greenhouse is not heated, by the way.
Amazing.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing that. We made, I'll just send some, we made, well, I made one thing, and Alan, of course, made a dessert. So if anyone knows him, that's basically what Alan makes. But I made a butternut squash soup with our butternut, and it had our shallots and garlic in it from the farm. And then it had local butter, local maple syrup, local salt. And normally it would have had stock that I made myself, but I forgot to defrost it, so it didn't. But and then Alan made a flan.
Yes, the Mexican flan. Eggs, local eggs, like just right there behind, and
Milk, local
Yeah,
milk.
local milk.
And I had some local sticky sweet ice cream that was made in Portland, Maine, which is vegan ice cream actually. So anyways, so that was our meal. Who else wants to share their meal? I know there's got
I
to be.
will if you want me to, Erica.
Of course I do.
I've been away since Saturday, so I was delighted to find from my freezer a home cooked lasagna. So that's in the oven right now, getting unfrozen and hot and melty. And then quickly made a kohlrabi slaw with some carrots that I had pickled last summer. So that's from the pantry in the freezer. And that's about it. It's gonna be a simple meal tonight because I've been away and just got back today. So, but from the freezer and pantry, that's the whole point, is using what you have.
Yes, amazing. Marion, did you make something?
We had just a very quick meal tonight, nothing really special. We have an omelet with a lot of my dried herbs. I don't have very much stuff in the pantry. We had the black raspberries that we did last time, and we have some tomato sauce and some jams, but I don't have much there, and we do not have a root cellar. So I did buy some very cool feta from Rising Tide, and we have sweet potato fries and broccoli, just kind of a throw together dinner after work. But everything is local and everything is super fresh and yummy. And I do dry a lot of herbs in the summer, so we have at least 4 different ones, including sage and winter savory and thyme and parsley involved in this meal, which really it's really been fun to do. So I'm
Great.
looking into kind of upgrading my dehydrator this year, so I can do more and make blends and things like that.
Excellent. Well, thank you for sharing. I see Helen is going to tell us what she made.
I just made a simple supper. It was a fun challenge. So I made sausage, beans, and greens, and I had some chorizo sausage from Switchback Farm in Nobleboro that I used. I had our dried yellow-eyed beans from our farm in the pantry. In our root garage, we don't have a root cellar, but the onions and garlic from our farm, we're still eating. I had tomatoes from our farm in the freezer that I pulled out, some plum tomatoes. On Thanksgiving, we had made a duck broth from Black Earth Farm, or duck for Thanksgiving. So I had broth from that in the freezer that I put into the dish. And then I don't have any greens this time of year right now, so I had local kale from the market that went into it.
Sounds amazing. Great
And-
job.
Pair it with a local craft beer.
Excellent. Thanks, Helen. Bonnie, your turn.
Sorry, I'm muted there. I don't know if I did quite nearly as good as everybody else, although I'm trying. I have pickled peppers, green beans, and carrots, and they're all different flavors. Some of the herbs were from my garden, some were purchased, but those were done at the end of last season from salvage. I didn't grow my own, but I do participate in a salvage program for produce. And that's been really some phenomenal stuff. So I have, for the meal, I have something that was in my freezer for a while, but it's a lentil chicken and sausage with some of the herbs that I have, but I have some sumac and other ingredients that I brought back from Turkey. So that I scavenged. I have collard greens from my salvage, and then those are cooked, braised in a turkey broth that I made last Thanksgiving. And there's a wonderful dry rubbed bacon that my son makes called Tom's Bacon. And so that's really adding a really lovely flavor to it. And for dessert, I love cheeses, and we're having a Hartwell cheese from Jasper Hill Farm, a local lemon and pear preserve on top of that with people may know Effie's is another local to us brand of crackers, and pecan crackers. So that's dessert. So
Sounds amazing. Great job. Thanks, Bonnie.
had a lot of fun thinking about it.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's what we hope people would have. I'm gonna ask Ray what she made, because I know she's made something interesting.
So I had some moose meat in the freezer that was given to me by someone at work who goes hunting. So I'm making some moose meatballs with like a soy sauce, pineapple glaze on whole wheat egg noodles
Sounds great.
with my own pickled beets.
Yay. Is there anyone else? Thoreen, do you want to share what you made? You need to unmute yourself.
Well, I'll just say that I didn't know Erica was making butternut squash soup, but we had butternut squash from Erica's garden, and I made butternut squash soup.
Oh, there you go. Like mother, like daughter. And what did you make, Lorraine?
Well, I didn't do so well with the local. I guess my goal tonight was to clean out a lot of stuff that was in the fridge. But locally, I guess I made sweet potatoes and butternut squash. I roasted them. I roasted Japanese sweet potatoes and some onions. And then I also made some beets according to a French recipe. A Roger Berger recipe is a tip of my hat to Alain. I thought I'd do the French. And then I just had some fish with butter lemon dill sauce over it. And for dessert, I had some leftover rice. So I made a rice pudding with these wonderful farm fresh eggs.
Where did you get those?
From Veggies to Table.
Bravo. Before Kirsten's going to go last, but before Kirsten goes, because then she's going to segue into her talk. Does anyone else want to tell us what they made? Oh, Kathy.
Heather also.
Oh, Heather too. Okay.
Oh,
Sorry.
I will, sure.
Allison also. Wow,
Oh, okay.
everybody.
All right. Everyone's going now. Okay, Kathy.
So we just kind of quickly pulled together a few things. We've got some Laken cheese as an appetizer. It's called Diane's something or other, but it's like a brie. And that's a little appetizer with some carrots and crackers. And then I'm roasting some beets. And I'm going to be putting some walnuts, which obviously aren't local, and some local goat cheese with that. And I also made an omelet with some shallots, and I'll put some goat cheese in that as well. And some, what else do I have in that? Oh, local mushrooms in the omelet.
Excellent.
And Dan's cooking something on the grill.
Right. And enjoying wine and Amaro.
Excellent. Good job.
Now, I love your kitty hanging out with you. That is so sweet.
Lorraine's kitty or our kitty? Is our kitty there too? Yeah. I don't know.
Lorraine's kitty.
Yeah. Lorraine's kitty's sleeping with her. I love it. Ours is over there. Heather, did you want to tell us what you made?
Sure. This was a fun challenge because I came home after work and I'm gonna have to look at it to remember. I made a simple supper of carrot and dill soup, and I used the carrots would be from the cellar, but I got them from Gorson Farm. I have a CSA that I share with a friend, the winter one, with the dill from the garden last summer, and onions. From the pantry, I used my Liberation Farm cornmeal, made some cornbread, and from the freezer, I pulled my rhubarb from the garden last summer and made a rhubarb crisp. So
wow,
simple, but you know, I hit every category. It was fun.
Great job. Good job. Thanks for sharing. Did you want to share, Allison? Did you?
Yeah, I will. So again, I'll just say I took this as an opportunity to stock my brand new pantry. And I'll put it on my Instagram later because I use no less than 15 local Maine ingredients. But what I made was a shiitake and sweet potato carbonara with sweet pea shoots. I made rye biscuits with Gruyere. And actually, funny story from Maine Grains. I used the rye flour from Maine Grains. I grew up with Amber from Maine Grains, and actually her parents live across the street. And then I made a bourbon blueberry smash for a little drink to go with dinner.
Delicious.
Super fun. Yeah. And I did have to miss a couple of my meetings this afternoon so I could scramble around and make all this happen. But let me tell you, time well spent and super fun.
Sorry about those meetings, but we're glad you were able to cook for us.
I'm not sorry.
Thanks for sharing. Before we go to Kirsten, did anyone else want to share?
I just want to quickly plug the recipe and submission link. You are going to receive that towards the end of, it'll go out automatically this evening. Make sure that you submit all those wonderful meal descriptions. It doesn't have to be a full recipe, but include those local ingredients, include some pictures to be eligible for your prizes. And we just love knowing what everybody did. So make sure to send those in so we can share them with everybody else.
Yeah, thank you. And if you do want to include the recipe, please do, because we all need new things to cook at this stage of the game, or at least I do. I'd love to learn. And I heard some pretty interesting sounding things from moose meatballs to blueberry smashes and everything in between. Sounded amazing. Great. So I think we'll segue into Kirsten and her meal, and then she's going to go into her talk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you for having me, and thank you everyone for supporting the cause and for all of those awesome and creative cooking ideas. I wanted to just do a brief introduction of myself, and then I'll talk to you about what I made, and then I'll go into the full talk. But I live in Liberty, Maine, and my husband and I have been here for about 6 years. I actually grew up more sort of in Mid-Coast Maine, left for a couple of years, then returned. And my husband and I are restoring a 120-acre farm that had been abandoned for about 30 years before we arrived. We have goats, geese, sheep, chickens, pigs, gardens, and a whole lot more going on. I should also let you know we do have a 12-week-old puppy at the moment, so if you see me looking at the floor or something like that, I'm just double checking what he's up to. But for my meal for today, I made a mashed potato and apple sauerkraut casserole, which I thought represented the root cellar pretty well. It was a real collection of what I still have plenty of down in the root cellar. And I also made a goose egg custard, which goose eggs just started coming in like a week ago, I think now. So it's a fun way to start using what's newly fresh. For the casserole, I was really happy to find the recipe because it is so representative of what's in my root cellar. Potatoes are a favorite of mine to grow and to harvest and preserve, and I still have some of them. And sauerkraut is another thing that I just make a ton of and love to store. And yeah, I love sauerkraut, so I have plenty of that. That's why we grow a ton of cabbage. Possibly my favorite vegetable to eat in all forms, not just sauerkraut, but also raw and cooked and all different ways. Anyways, so I have a simple sauerkraut recipe actually on my YouTube channel if anyone does want to check that out and wants to try making sauerkraut this year. But what I had left in my root cellar is actually a spicy sauerkraut. So it was a particularly zingy recipe. And the casserole was really easy and used, all these different things. Mashed up the potatoes, mixed the sauerkraut with apples. I unfortunately don't have stored apples from our own orchards, but I was able to get those locally. Mix those all together, and then on top, breadcrumbs and cheese. I also didn't make my own breadcrumbs, but those are pretty easy to make yourself. And then I baked it, and it was very tasty. I thank Erica for the inspiration to really get into everything that I actually have in the cellar. And then the goose egg custard, I should mention as well. Again, so this is a goose egg. Unfortunately, I don't have a chicken egg to compare it to, but chicken eggs are much smaller. And a goose egg is equivalent to like 3 chicken eggs. The yolk is basically half of the inside of the egg, whereas in a chicken egg, it's like a quarter or a third of the inside of the egg is yolk and the rest is white. So it's much more yolk. And so you get a thicker batter, a yellower batter. People really love goose eggs for baking and making pasta and things like that. But my favorite thing to do with goose eggs, I have 20 geese, so I have plenty of goose eggs this time of year. And my favorite thing to do with them is to make custard because it's very easy and very delicious, and just makes a super flavorful, rich custard that I make with either local maple syrup or local honey, depending on my tastes for the day, I guess. But a little bit more about me and our story and how we got here. So as I mentioned, we've been here for 6 years. And I think my most frequently asked question, especially these days with a lot of people sort of relocating rurally, is how we found our farm. unfortunately for people looking now, I don't know how much our experience translates directly to the 2022 COVID real estate market, but I will certainly say that patience was a huge part of finding this property, because we looked off and on for 2 or 3 years, and every weekend we were driving to different properties that we'd found on Zillow. We had a very strict budget when we were looking, so a lot of the properties that we looked at had like no buildings at all, or they were like recovering wood lots and things like that. So it really did take a lot of patience and time for the right place to come up. In particular, our own creature comforts weren't necessarily as important to us, as we knew we were moving with at least some animals, so we needed some kind of structure that we could put them in. And finally, we found this 200-year-old farm, which had been in the same family for those whole 200 years, but it had not been actively farmed in over 30 years, and had been pretty much fully abandoned for the last maybe 20, possibly even more years. So it almost seemed too good to be true for us, so we made an offer immediately. However, there were certainly reasons that it came up within our budget. So the house, which was built in the late 1800s, had never been plumbed, had no electricity or running water, just a 3-hole outhouse and a rusty wood stove. And I will show you some photos here. I'll try and share my screen to show exactly what it looked like when we first got here. Bear with me just one moment. Just got to pull this up here, share, and make this full screen. And okay. And I'm just going to make you guys a little smaller too, so I can see what I'm doing. So we first purchased the place in September of 2015, and this is what it looked like when we first arrived. I think this was our first weekend. So as you can see, very overgrown. The barn and house were in pretty rough shape, even from the outside, and in particular, the fields were super overgrown, and you could not even see the stone walls that run along the road all the way up and down. And there was like 2 feet of manure in the barn left over from animals that had been farmed there in the past. And so we had to dig all of that out, and then we put floors in and cleaned it up, replaced where there were actual rotten floorboards, as you can see with the big hole there. But that was a particularly unpleasant task. I'm going to pause just 1 second and close one gate on the puppy that he just knocked down. Caper, caper, caper. Oh, for goodness sake.
And I was just going to mention, as she does that, everyone should feel obviously comfortable to be moving about and getting their food. I mean, I think you all are, and eating with us. That's part of the whole supper club.
I'm back. Sorry about that. All right. So, and then, yes, this is a view of the house from our upper field, again, around the time that we closed on the property. And this one is particularly striking before and after. So that was when we first moved here. And then this is more or less the same angle from just this past summer. So we really did a lot of work in clearing those fields. We obviously put a pond in, and we moved and rebuilt a garden shed next to the garden. Yeah, put a lot of work into doing some restoration, both on the buildings and on the land. And this is from when we were rebuilding the house, which was in 2018. So you can see definitely a different look. Our first garden, which we put in 2017. And behind there, where there's all that brush and overgrowth, is where there is a pond now, as well as that garden shed. Some farming experts, homesteading experts, have mentioned that, like, if you can, always put a pond in, which is certainly something that we believed we have like I mentioned, 20 geese and a whole bunch of ducks. So the pond is definitely a great place for them. And it's also a water source for us, you know, in case of emergency. And then I will actually get to the goats are next. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second here. And then we'll get back to looking at the slideshow in a second here. Bear with me one more second. And so after 6 years, we have reached the point where the farm probably resembles a bit more like what it looked like as a working family farm in like the early 1900s. And we're now working to put sort of our own mark on the property. Which is starting with putting in orchards. We're looking to put in some trails and looking, you know, more towards the future of the farm now versus just restoration. So it's been a long, kind of wonderful journey with a few challenges, but I hope that our story sort of inspires some people to take the leap, become more self-sufficient and live closer to the land themselves, or even just sort of take that risk and do the thing that you've always wanted to do. And in addition to the projects of restoring the land, keeping up with the vegetable garden and the animals, in the past few years, I did write a couple of books on homesteading, which are The Modern Homesteader's Guide to Keeping Geese, which is about geese, and So You Want to Be a Modern Homesteader, which is sort of a basic look at, like, you know, if you're making the leap from city living to country living and all of the adjustments and changes that you may not have thought of. And I also offer, as we mentioned for the giveaway, I do like livestock consults for folks interested in what animals might be best suited to their land, as well as specific goose consults. And we breed Nigerian dwarf goats, which we sell every year, and South Down baby doll sheep. And we also have Tamworth pigs, the geese that I've mentioned a few times now, the chickens, guinea fowl, the livestock guardian dog, and all of these animals we try our best to use in, like, we don't eat any of our animals. So they have to serve a purpose on our farm. So we use them to help us manage land, and we have added them over time as we need like certain land projects completed, or as it sort of makes sense for us to have, you know, have these animals for an actual purpose, not just a hobby farm. So I'll pull the slideshow back up here. Nope, that's the wrong one. Hold on one second. I got to get it on my screen as well. Let's see. Oh. Bear with me just one moment. Share screen. Here we go. Don't know why. For some reason, I can't see the screen, even though I can see that you guys can. So let's see here. Erica, can you tell me if you are seeing
We are seeking Tractor Supply.
Tractor Supply? Okay, yeah, it keeps saying that I'm pulling up the slideshow, but then it pulls up my background browser. Here, bear with me one second, and I'm pretty sure I can pull it right up. Sorry for the delay, guys.
Birds.
There it is. All right. And share.
Otherwise, if you want, Kirsten, you can talk and you can email it to me and I can try to share it if it's too
That's all right. I think I just got it. We see it. Okay, perfect. I don't know why it was doing that, but there we go. All right. So just have to skip ahead because it took me back. All right, yes. So we have Nigerian dwarf goats, which we use for brush control and dairy. We have had goats since we first moved here. They were the first animal that we added we moved in April, I think, and they arrived in June. So, so they came quickly. And we do milk our goats. Like I said, we use them for dairy, really just personal use dairy, largely like cream in your coffee kind of a thing. Although I do make a lot of ice cream during milking season and some caramels and things like that. And we also do sell the kids every year, which is a nice little bit of farm income. And I find a great way to, meet enthusiastic people who are, excited to be getting goats as well. It's always a lot of fun. But our primary purpose for the goats is for eating brush. So like you saw in that first picture I showed of how overgrown those stone walls were, the goats have been a huge part of bringing those back to being just stone walls, amidst grass, but otherwise no overgrowth or anything like that, particularly in spots where, for example, we've got a lot of poison ivy. So we don't want to really get in there, weed whack or anything. It's going to, not be fun for us, but they'll eat poison ivy. So they really help keep those stone walls clear, save us a ton of labor. And then we have Tamworth pigs, which are for heavy land management. We have 2 3-year-old females. So again, like I said, we don't eat our animals. Most people aren't necessarily used to seeing pigs, that are 3 years old, but they actually, I like the older pigs because they're larger size. They can really actually get more done. And people will also ask, like, why can't the goats clear land the way the pigs do? But they really do a different job. So goats eat overgrowth, but it will, come back. They're particularly good on like stone walls, rocks, those kinds of things. Pigs aren't as sure-footed. They do eat overgrowth, but they also uproot it. So they actually turn over the soil and leave you with earth that you can then work with. And they've done an amazing job. We mostly use them in the woods where we have some woods, but there's a lot of like honeysuckle and brush and stuff trying to choke out the trees, and the pigs will come in, take care of that. They'll leave the big established trees and leave us with basically silvo pasture. So they do an amazing job. And then the geese are for eggs as well as alarms. And so geese are not necessarily aggressive animals, and I'm happy to answer any questions about geese that you guys might have. They aren't necessarily aggressive, but they are usually loud if something strange is going on, and they can be intimidating. So they really help to protect the smaller birds like chickens, ducks, and guineas. In fact, just the other day, I looked out the window and a hawk had landed that was trying to take one of our ducks, and there was a goose just running at it and attacking back, and the goose was big enough that it was just too much for the hawk to deal with, and he flew away. Especially since we have a large flock, it's pretty intimidating. So geese are for protection for the smaller birds and alarms for the property in general. We love their eggs. And then we do also have chickens, ducks, and guineas, which we also use for eggs. Guineas help with tick control, which is super important these days. And ducks will help with slugs and other bugs like that the chickens and guineas don't like as much. And let's see here. Then we have baby doll sheep, which we added just last year. And this particular breed of sheep is a small breed, so they are fairly easy to manage, like on your own, take care of. Not like some sheep breeds are somewhat intimidatingly large, but baby doll Southdown baby doll sheep, unlike the goats. So the goats are different from the pigs and how they manage land, and sheep are yet different again because they really are grass eaters. So we got them because they can actually eat in between trees, and like as we're putting orchards in, they can help do lawn care around those orchards, because they won't bother the trees in the way that the goats most definitely would. And this is our first spring lambing, so our first year with the baby doll sheep, having lambs here on the farm. We're super excited. This breed is a very popular breed, so I do also sell these lambs, which will be part of our farm's long-term plan, sort of preserving this breed, which is pretty unusual and hard to find here, especially like in the Northeast, New England, and Maine specifically. So we're really excited for lambs coming at the end of April. And so that is pretty much the story of our farm. And we are really excited to be moving forward into orchards and trails and those breeding programs. But we have spent the past 6 years really focused on restoration and trying to get things done using the animals as part of our plan to help us sort of save on labor. It's been quite an adventure, but now I will open it up if anybody has any questions. Yeah, shoot.
I had a couple that were given to me. And did you want to talk a little bit about seed starting? Was that something?
Yes. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, of course. Yeah, so this time of year, of course, is, you know, when we're largely starting seeds in the garden. Let me actually just pull up one other screen here. So yeah, this time of year we're starting seeds. We have just sort of started with onions and a few real basics, but soon we'll be getting into cabbages and tomatoes, which will be going inside about now and then be transplanted out. We actually sow a lot of our crops as direct sow rather than starting seeds indoors, which depends hugely on, well, where you're located. I think all of us are in Maine, but also like what you're focusing on growing. And I like to, having gardened for a few years now, I like to really focus in on certain things that I know I like, I know I'll eat, that preserve well. So I will do large numbers of cabbage for the sauerkraut, potatoes, beans, which I make dilly beans out of. Those are all things, well, the cabbage I'll start indoors in the next couple weeks here. And then beans and potatoes are things that I direct sow. But I will do large numbers of staple crops and then, you know, small numbers of little experimental things. But I've found over the years, it's easier for me to focus on, you know, certain plants rather than sort of spreading myself thin over a bunch of experimental things. And beans, cabbage, and potatoes to a lesser extent, but in particular, I find are particularly hardy here in Maine, grow really well, and then produce a really large harvest with a limited amount of attention, which I think is also important. I saw someone asking where we source our seeds, and I thought I should definitely mention that for the past couple years, actually, I've been able to use the potatoes that I have left, sow them into the garden as our next year's potatoes. And so that's definitely an ideal way. I wish I did more seed saving in general. Potatoes are definitely like the easiest thing to seed save with. But otherwise, I get most of my seeds through Johnny's Seeds, which is local to us here in Maine, and a few through Fedco Seeds, also here in Maine, and High Mowing Seeds, which is in Vermont. Yeah, and one of the other reasons that I do a lot of direct sowing is that for a really long time, until the past couple of years, we really lived in a home that had not particularly great light and not really any heat. And so it was kind of, and not like a lot of electricity options to supplement those things. So now I do have a setup in the basement with like growing lights and heating pads for seedlings and all that kind of thing. But you know, back in the day, that's definitely how I got into the habit, was seeing what I really could be successful growing without having a lot of starting options before the ground thawed. So that was part of that. Yeah.
I have a couple more questions for you. There were a few actually that you may or may not have seen. So one of them was when you made the choice to live like a homesteader, are you unable to travel, or how do you deal with the animals?
It's, I mean, it's definitely harder to travel. It takes, I mean, it basically, it takes more planning. It's certainly still possible. I think it takes planning around your specific trip, and then also like planning more in general, like around kind of your lifestyle. Like you have to kind of always be on the lookout for people who might be able to help out and things like that. It's taken us a few years to get to the point that we have people we know who have experience with the kind of animals that we have and that we trust. You know, it definitely makes traveling a lot more difficult. I wouldn't recommend certainly a lot of livestock to someone who really is excited about traveling all the time, but it is still possible to travel when you're homesteading with good planning. And hopefully you also enjoy being home, especially during the summertime when there's baby goats and things like that. So that makes being home more enjoyable as well.
Excellent. And then we've got a bunch of, actually, the questions are like flowing in here. Let's see, I've got one. What do you do with the manure from the animals? Do you incorporate it back into the land? And if so, how?
Yes, so we have a pretty large manure pile at the moment, and we do incorporate it back into the garden. So we'll spread it and mix it in. We have a couple different things that we do. So we will mix the manure into the garden from the manure pile, but we also actually overwinter our pigs in the garden area. And so that means that they have their manure, which generally is in certain areas of the garden because pigs are pretty neat. But they also just mix up all like I don't take anything really out of the garden that I'm not harvesting in the fall. The pigs move all that organic matter in and mix everything up, kind of like a rototiller, but even better. And so that's partially how we keep the garden fertilized. But the manure pile, we use it around, you know, bushes and things that we've got growing, as well as specifically in the garden. And friends and family come and take some manure on occasion by the truckload. So we like to help them out when we can. We, at the moment, our number of animals has grown somewhat slowly over the past 6 years. So at the moment we do have a lot of like relatively fresh manure, and just like the backside of the pile is really good for actually using on the garden. As we go forward, we may be more overwhelmed with manure and do more sharing of it and that kind of thing.
How long does it have to sit before you can use it?
I think the general, I think you're supposed to wait about a year, but basically I think the longer, to a certain point, of course, but basically the longer the better. So, especially, it depends on how much like hay and shavings and bedding is in the manure, along with the droppings. Just regular droppings will break down right away, but we do have a fair amount of shavings and hay in particular, in our bedding that ends up going out in the manure pile.
Okay, moving on to a couple more questions. Are you planning on, do you think you'll get a greenhouse? Are you happy with just doing your direct seeding and some grow
We
lights?
are actively looking to get a greenhouse. we actually have a greenhouse that we found on Craigslist that was like a disassemble and take it away project. So we disassembled it and took it away last year, and we're going to be putting it up this year. And that should help with starting a lot more seeds a lot sooner. And also, I'm even more excited about like extending the growing season in the fall and having, you know, some of the, you know, we're not going to heat it, I don't think, but some cold hardy crops growing basically year round is going to be very exciting for us.
Yay. And so then that brings me to one of the other questions that I had given to me is, when you did this restoration of your house, did you do it all yourself or did you have workers too?
We did a large amount of the work ourselves, and that was part of why in the slideshow you may have noticed we moved here in well, we bought the property in 2015 and we didn't renovate the house until 2018, and that was partially us getting our ducks in a row for the renovation. We did certainly my husband did like all the design work and sort of site foreman job himself, and his son helped us full time, and we had one neighbor helping us full time, and otherwise pretty much all ourselves. We did bring in experts for certain, like we had an electrician and a plumber come in because we figured we didn't want to mess those particular things up, but the construction itself, yes, all ourselves.
Excellent. And then I see, so another question here. So this about the manure, so it says, do you get soil tested and do you, I'm looking,
I can articulate if you want. So Kirsten, I was just curious about, you know, the amount of manure that you may have on a given plot. You know, do you ever, because it has so much nitrogen in it, do you ever actually get your soil tested before you actually plant out a specific crop, so you know that you're not like overdoing it on the nitrogen, so that you're not just like relying on vegetation, but actually getting your flowering or your corn, etc.?
Right. Yeah, we haven't done a soil test in the garden since we started putting the pigs in there, which we probably should do. I think that would be a good, you know, yeah, that'd be a good thing to do. We did, when we first moved here, do soil testing, both in the fields in general and the garden, and we were happy to discover the garden was in super good shape. The fields we've been adding a little bit of lime to, but I have so far gone with observation because the pigs are pretty predictable in where they use the bathroom and stuff like that. So I try to plant according to what I've observed, but a test would be an easier way to be certain.
Excellent. I see Deirdre has a question. Let's see if Deirdre's works now.
Hi. Does it work? Okay. Yeah, I've switched over to the office computer. I'm Deirdre. Yeah, sorry I couldn't introduce myself earlier. I work for Veggies to Table, but I also have a startup homestead in Maine with 6 other friends. We bought 54 acres there last January. My question is kind of related to that because, so at the moment I'm living in my car and I managed to borrow an office to get some Wi-Fi because we weren't able to winterize the well there. So kind of in relation to that, like how do you prioritize building things and growing things, and like which to do first, priorities of like, I want to be able to feed myself, but I also need a house to live in. So like which things happen when?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I think, I mean, partially it's probably like somewhat personal and what the priority is for you. And what the situation, like what your specific situation is. I would, like, if I were in a similar situation, I would probably prioritize like a basic structure and like heat as necessary, things like that. I would prioritize the structure, but not prioritize like necessarily getting the structure to full like absolutely comfortable living. Um, and then focus on the gardens and stuff, and then sort of head back to the structure. The thing I would say with prioritizing projects that we've always done is we really sit down around this time of year and make a list for the summer, and try to be serious about making it, first of all, reasonable that we can get it done within the summer, and we really work as hard as we need to finish that list for the summer. But at the same time, we leave things off of it, and then we don't like worry or stress or feel guilty that those things aren't getting done because they weren't on the goal list for the summer. So whatever you do choose to prioritize, sort of sticking to that, like writing it out and, you know, having timelines, I think is incredibly helpful. But yeah, I would do the basics of a structure first, then food, and then the rest of a structure. I think you can, I mean, I think some of our happiest days were, you know, with just the wood stove and the outdoor shower. So I personally don't mind roughing it, as long as you don't. That's the way I would go.
Yeah, we have a camper and a wood stove in there at the moment and a shower. So we're pretty good for basic necessities. It's just hard to plan for what comes after that. Well, I guess having water that we can drink in the winter would be good.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. That was helpful.
Right. So I'm going to go through a few more questions. So when you restored and cleaned your barn, did you use earth on the floor or wood on the floor, or both? Or
Yes, so we used wood on the floor. We were lucky, a lot of the floor, maybe a little more than half, I'd say, was in good enough condition that we could just leave it. But some of the floorboards had actually fallen through or were totally rotten. And so we did replace those. What to use as flooring for livestock is definitely a question I get, and wood is fine. It will eventually rot if your animals are on it all the time and are, you know, leaving their droppings and stuff. So it's something to be aware of, but it's still definitely going to work. I think it's fairly easy to clean out. We clean our stalls pretty regularly, especially during the winter time when they're in there more often, to help prevent, you know, rot and odor and things like that. I personally don't particularly like cement. I think it's a bit cold, especially considering how severe our winters are. Dirt floor is a good option. It's like a little dirtier, and especially in how we're using our barn, where we have animal stalls, but we also have machinery and equipment and like work areas and stuff. So it's a little too dirty for if we're going to also be using it as somewhere to lie down and work on equipment. But dirt does work very well for animals, I think. And it works particularly well if you're going to do things like a deep litter method during the winter. It can be actually quite a bit warmer.
okay.
Yeah, well, we have our barn guy coming tomorrow, and we haven't really made our decision yet, but when we moved into the property initially, my father in 1982, you know, there was already a 100-year-old barn, and the wood was still there after 100 years, after, you know, cattle and horses and everything else. So I think we're probably going to go with wood.
Yeah, that was like, I mean, our barn, the thing really that makes a difference is the roof on the barn, because that's what really protects the floors. So our barn, we were lucky, had a metal roof put on it at some point, I think during the 70s, and I think that's the only reason it was still standing.
Great. So I have more questions. Two completely different questions. First, one of them was, so how, like, when you did this, was the goal sort of to be as self-sufficient as possible? And I guess, you know, that's the goal of homesteading. So how close are you to sort of that goal?
Yeah, the goal was definitely to be as self-sufficient as possible. I read something recently that pointed out that like self-sufficient is not necessarily the same as subsistence. So while we do try to make and do everything that we can ourselves, I think part of being a homesteader is having the confidence and the knowledge to be able to do things yourself, but also making the choices when maybe that's not the appropriate thing to do. So we do try to, like, I try not to feel guilty when there is something I don't necessarily grow or make myself. But largely, we do provide ourselves with all, I'd say 90% of like our vegetable intake. The exception being this time of year when I want some fresh vegetables. And I do a lot of like, you know, making bread. I've experimented a little with making cheeses and soaps and things like that. And then I also personally think that a huge part of homesteading is self-sufficiency or self-reliance of the individual. So really feeling like you can count on yourself, being confident in your abilities, your physical and mental abilities to sort of get it done. And that was something I felt I lacked when I came to this lifestyle that I think I have gained. And I think that is as important to me as any actual you know, thing that I've grown or made, is just feeling confident that I can do those kinds of things.
Great. And of course, anyone can raise their hand. I'm just going through questions that have been given to me, but please raise your hands too. But one of the questions was, do geese and chickens get along? And can you add geese to an established chicken flock, or do you have to, like, how do you do that?
So geese and chickens definitely can get along, and especially if they free range, they'll probably get along great. I recommend if you get geese and chickens under any circumstance, but especially if the chicken flock is established and so the goose is not going to imprint on them, like they're not all going to be babies together, I recommend having a separate house for the geese, so a separate coop. And they can still turn out into a run or free range together. But if you're locking them in an enclosed space at night, have them separated just in case. During mating season, geese can get a bit more aggressive, and they're just so much bigger than chickens that even if they are a little bit aggressive, it can be, you know, it can be a major problem for a chicken. So they get along fine, mingling around in the yard. I wouldn't lock them up together.
Excellent to know. I see there's another question in the chat, and the other question I had, I don't know that you said this, but you might have, Kirsten, but how did you decide, like, what were you doing before, and how did you decide to do this?
How I decided was, I think, pretty sort of slowly and organically. We started with a garden, which I definitely like credit my parents for that, because they always had a huge garden when I was growing up. And so once I was sort of settled, it just made it was just like what you did. So we started a little garden and got a couple chickens, got a couple geese, and then sort of escalated, I guess, from there. It was definitely like a lifestyle I was interested in, but the idea of like actually having a farm of the scale that we had, I'd never really considered until we started adding animals, and then it, you know, started meeting more people who were doing this kind of thing and was inspired. So sort of a slow organic process. I worked in customer service before I actually worked at my dad's company, which I think some of you are familiar with. And I still do work from home part-time now. So when that being from home, I think, has made a huge difference, because there's a lot of commute time is also taken out of that. But so that's what I did before, and to a smaller extent is something I still do.
Great. And that actually, I see one of the questions is, to what degree is your homestead self-sustaining versus needing other forms of income?
Yeah, and so yeah, I do still have a part-time job, and I think it's also like when people are considering homesteading, I think being fully like self-sustaining out of the gate or even within the first couple years is uh, like you shouldn't necessarily expect that. You should be prepared to have to keep your day job for a while. I also think it's important to look at more diverse options for farm incomes if you can. So beyond just vegetables, animal produce, there are a lot of little things that people can do, like like goat yoga has gotten very popular, or in my case doing consults and focusing on the education and the books and things like that. So little added things that you can do to add to your farm's income that maybe aren't just straight from growing vegetables or raising animals are always great ways to diversify and increase your income.
And then the last question that I have, and then I'll, obviously I'll open it, and it's just one that Allison could ask too, but she put it in there, so I'll ask for her. Is, do you have a current writing project, a new one?
Yes, sort of. I'm in very early stages, so I won't go too much into what it's about. It is different. It's not as educational as my last couple books, and it's more historical. And I guess that's all I'll say for now. But yes, I am starting work on a new writing project.
Oh no. Okay, we'll have to wait and find out. Tom.
Yeah, Karen. I just wanted to, since Kirsten didn't do this, I just wanted to show you her books. I don't know if you can see them. This one is So You Want to Be a Modern Homesteader. This is her latest book. And her first book was about geese, as you could probably guess. She's a real goose lady.
Excellent. Thank you for doing that. It's good to have a mom here to
Isn't
it? Does anyone, I think I could ask questions, but I'm sure some of you have questions too. We have 10 more minutes, so ask away if you have questions. And you can even just unmute yourselves and ask, or raise your hands and I'll unmute.
I have a question as a huge fan. Why no horses?
Because I had horses growing up, and I would love to have horses again, but I also, basically at this point, an animal addition to the farm has to serve some sort of purpose. And I'm sure the argument could be made for a draft horse as serving a purpose, but I don't think that argument could be made to my husband. It could be made in general. But yeah, someday. I would say someday. It's definitely on the bucket list. Yeah.
Sorry.
And mine's really quick. And then can people visit your farm?
So we aren't open to the public at the moment. I've definitely had some folks visit, like if you send me a message and we can sort of figure it out from there. I am hoping this summer, I'm still in the planning stages, but I'm hoping this summer to do my first live class. That class would be focused on goats. So it's somewhat specific, but that would be a visiting opportunity. And then going forward, like next year, we'd like to actually participate in like an open farm day or something like that. Since we are, since we live here, I like the idea of having like organized events like that. So it's, not just people stopping by, but we definitely love to show off the animals and the farm to people. Yeah.
Great. Brady?
It's so I was curious about the fact that you said you don't have horses, but do you actually collaborate with other farmers on the opportunities of doing some certain tasks on your land? So like say, hey, you know, draft horse guy, can you come over and we'll rent your horses for the day to till up our soil for the crop, etc.? Or do you have somebody who comes by with bees to do a beehive farming?
Yeah, actually, it's a great, and there was just a question about bees in the chat too. And that's probably our current most prime example of that we do, is that we have a neighbor who keeps bees, and he drops several hives off here in the spring, picks them up in the fall. And so we don't have to worry about, you know, maintenance and caring for the bees, but they're, you know, pollinating around here, and it's fantastic. We love that arrangement. And he also gives us some honey in the fall, so it's great. But we don't currently have a ton of arrangements like that, but we did a lot more things like that when we first moved here. I feel like, you know, we had a neighbor who came and hayed for us. I think it's definitely important to consider those options. And we have a lot of, like, I guess we have less specific skills sharing at the moment, but as like knowledge sharing. So we have a lot of neighbors who are sort of in similar places, and we'll sort of run ideas by each other and stuff like that. But building that local community, our local, you know, our Hay Guy now is a resource of just like, you know, knowing more about the local land and stuff. So building connections with your neighbors, super important. More important, I think, if you're living rurally than you would think. And skills sharing, absolutely. If you have complementary skills, somebody, you know, and you can work out bartering and trading, that is a fantastic way to go. Yeah.
And that actually is a question that Marian asked, so she would love to know. And I think I actually saw someone doing this in Maine. Like, is there a way, if you want to clear your land, to borrow animals to do that if you don't have animals?
I know that, well, I know that Mofka does like an equipment rental, and I don't know about animals though. Like, I don't know. I think it would probably, I don't know if there's a specific organization that sets things up like that. I would think that things like that would most likely successfully come out of like an organic building a relationship with someone. But if there is a organization, yeah, if there is an organization someone knows, yeah.
I do. There is a company, I believe it's in Biddeford, and it's called Scapegoats.
Oh, great.
And it's a, you know, it's a business, but they bring goats to your location to help you clear brush, and you know, you talk to them about what you need, and they bring their goats to take care of it.
Awesome.
So I think they're Biddeford based. I know for sure the name is Scapegoats.
Oh, and
yeah, and just to that point though, I just want to make sure to forewarn anybody who's interested in that, because I'm a horticulturist, but that if that's the case, make sure that they are not going to do any brush management when plants are going through the seed point of their lifespan, because we don't need to spread more seed through the, you know what I'm saying? Like, make sure we don't spread more seed or weed problems or invasive problems when the animals are digesting it and then extracting it, and it's not actually broken down. So
what a great point. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's a great point.
So we have 2 more questions, 3 more minutes. Of course, people can stay on if for, you know, a few minutes longer if Kirsten's okay with that. But I see there's a couple. Kirsten, can you see the questions in the bottom of the chat there?
Yes, yes. So I had, how many acres is our farm? So it's 120. And also background on the name Hostel Valley is actually the name of the road that we're on, which I'm told was so named because of arguing neighbors, and the area was famous for the neighbors never getting along. and hence Hostel Valley, but we chose to name the farm that just because it's memorable. And then Biggest Little Farm is a fun documentary. Yes, I have seen it. I would definitely recommend watching it if you're interested in you know, this sort of lifestyle, this sort of thing. And there's a lot of good examples and applicable things if this is something that you're doing yourself. I did think when I was watching it that their budget seemed rather large.
We felt that way ourselves.
So, I mean, take it with a grain of salt, but there is applicable information in it. Yes. And it's fun. It's fun to watch.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so I mean, I don't know, we're almost at the end. I want to, you know, we are so grateful for Kirsten for being here. Again, we can, if there's more questions and people want to stay, we can, but I know that don't want to take, you know, I want people to feel comfortable, you know, leaving at the proper time. And we are like so happy that you were here, and we hope that you will all submit your recipes and photos and your local food so that you may win prizes. And we hope that you'll come to other supper clubs. So nice to see new faces and faces, some very, very familiar ones. And yeah, it's been wonderful. But again, if there's any more questions, we're still here for one more minute or even, but thank you.
Perhaps we unmute for a minute and give Kirsten a big round of applause.
Yeah,
and
thank you.
Kirsten, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you guys. Thanks everyone for coming.
Oh, it was great.
Thank you.